Welcome to Parshat BeHa'alotcha. This week's Parsha is an interesting point in the narrative of our history. It is both we are in the middle, the exact middle, maybe not word for word or letter for letter, but the middle sort of chronologically of Sefer Bamidbar. And although Vayikra is like the middle of a 5-book series, although we'll call into question whether it should be 5 or maybe 7 books, certainly Bamidbar feels like the middle between slavery and freedom, right? Vayikra is sort of like a chronological step out of the list. And I have taught in the past, and I certainly thought of it this way, I'm curious if other people did, that the decision that we would be on a 40-year timetable in the desert was like a predetermined thing as we left Egypt. I think I taught about like the long, short paths and the short, long paths and how God knew we would need this longer path. And it was this kindness, not punishment, that, the people of the desert remained people of the desert, and it was their children that really got to enter the land of Israel. And then I was reading about this week's Parsha and learning, and I saw a thought that perhaps actually that determination was made within this week's Parsha. So I want to look at the moment before the choice is made, not at the choice. We can look at the ramifications of the choice next week, but to really think about like what that moment before those choices mean. There's something very, I think, heartbreaking about them. People often point to the moment before something terrible. I remember the last Shabbat before someone got sick or passed away, or right, that last good day at work before I made a terrible choice that got me fired, whatever the thing is, like you sort of hold on to that moment. I think I do personally. And so there was something intriguing to me about that moment. So I'm going to share my screen for anyone who doesn't have the source sheet up. Hello, Margot. You just missed some framing. You're right on time.
Thank you.
And to look at this moment that I think is really filled with like hope and anticipation, is when Moshe in our parsha, and again, this is right sort of before the halfway point. So leading up to this point, we talked about the way the camp's oriented. We talked about some rules and laws around Nazir and Sota, a few different sort of pieces that are all generally positive. And after this point, we're going to switch gears into like the people who complain. But right now, we're not there. Right? Moshe says to Chovav ben Reuel Hamidiani, who we generally say is Yitro. Yitro is a fascinating character. He perhaps was there at Sinai. At the very least, he's there sort of post-revelation. Some people say he converted, other people say he didn't, but it seems that he's ready to depart from Bnei Israel, and Moshe is trying to convince him to come. Right? He says, we're setting out, nosim anachnu. And Rashi notes, and we'll see here, right, that Rashi notes that's very powerful language to say nosim anachnu. Right? I am going with them is what Moshe is saying. And we know that Moshe does not get there. And there's a lot of debate as to whether Moshe is sort of like telling a rosy pictured story for his father-in-law to give him confidence to come. But Rashi maintains that at this moment, Moshe does not know he's not going, right? Again, the future looks good. This is like the best part of the story. Nosim anachnu, we are all going to that place that God has given us, right? And has promised to us. Ki Hashem diber tov al Yisrael, right? God has promised to be generous with Israel. This is like a moment of expansive vision and thought. Yitro / Chovav turns him down politely, and the way in which he does so, I think, is a clue. Hello, Gerbers, as to how we got to be in this positive place, and how maybe we can get back there after the fall, because Chovav says no, thank you, lo elech ki im el artzi ve'el moladeti elech. Right, that is language that is sort of reminiscent of Abraham, the lech lecha me'artecha u'me'moladetecha, and it seems like Chovav's clue here that he's giving us is everyone should be going to their eretz, right? We should all be running. Bnei Israel is going in one direction to Canaan. Yitro might be going back to Midian, but he seems to be emphasizing in a very subtle way the importance of one's land, one's birthplace, one's native place, however it's translated. Right? Basically, you should go. And of course, Moshe at this moment says, no, please come, right? Telech imanu v'haya hatov hahu asher yetiv Hashem imanu v'heitavnu lach. Right? And Moshe says, we will extend you the same bounty that God is granting us, right? The word tov, especially in relation to God, is an underlying word in these few short psukim. And I want us to think about it as like the expansiveness right there. I think I saw a comic once with a woman and a suitcase, and she's standing on a road, and the road is blank in front of her, and she has her little thought bubble says, I am leaving. Right. And I think that is the mindset of Bnei Israel through a lot of Sefer Bamidbar. They're running from, they're not running to, there's nothing on the horizon for them, but they're leaving. They know they're leaving. Right. And we see that immediately in the complaints that they complain about how good Egypt was. Right. Which makes no sense at all. And then side by side, next box or whatever we call the piece of a comic strip, right, has the same woman, same suitcase, same road, but in front of her there's trees and buildings and a park or a bench or something, and she says, I am expanding. And I really think that like these psukim are a perfect example of that. I am expanding, right? I see the possibilities in front of me, I'm running towards them. And so how does that come to fruition? So there's two very important things about what happens right after that. It says, Vayis'u mehar Hashem, right? We leave Har Sinai, derech shloshet yamim, which we'll see is important, right? 3 days. Va'aron brit Hashem noseh lifneihem, derech shloshet yamim, latur lahem menucha. Right. And it says that the Ark of the Covenant of Hashem travels in front of them on those 3 days to help them scout out places to rest. And this is interesting because the Aron is described as being in the center of the layout of the camp, right? We took great painstaking detail in who stands where and how we travel. And this was not the plan, but maybe there's something about this expansive vision, this place where Moshe is going with Bnei Israel into the land of Israel, where the Aron wants to travel first, right? To be led by God, to be pulled maybe even along, as we'll see, by God. And the Anan Hashem is Alehem, Yomam B'nisam Min HaMachaneh, right? That God's cloud is above them. And so it seems like when you can be in this sort of expansive place, when you can feel the goodness that God is giving you, God leads the way and gives you shelter from the hard things. And Rashi here notes, right, that immediately, miyad, ad shlosha yamim anu nichnasim la'aretz, right? For Rashi, this is a point before that choice of 40 years, before the people make that choice. At this point, we still could have gone the 3-day way. We still could have entered Israel within the week. And it was only because of the incident. And if you look in the English, right, it says Parak Yud Aleph, chapter 11, which is really, it's like half a parak after this. So this is that, that exact moment before the complaining starts. And that complaining in chapter 11 is about nothing. It's unclear what it's about. It's just a change in mindset. We are no longer expanding, we are just leaving. And then it is hard. It's hard to just leave a place. And Rashi, right, asks, why did Moshe include himself? Because it had not yet been decreed. Adayin lo nigzara gzera alav. Right? So this, again, I feel like I've said it 6 times. I'm going to say it once more because I think it's just so, this is a powerful moment to be a part of Bnei Israel. This is a moment where their leadership is on the same page, where we're leaving on a journey that will get us there very shortly, where God is leading the way and providing cover. And there is then, following those 2 psukim are here. Uh-oh, my beautiful picture did not load properly. I'll have to see if I can find it, but we can imagine it. Actually, it was just a picture of the text itself. I'm going to stop the share for just one moment and see if I can pull it over here. These 2 psukim are psukim we're very familiar with, right? We sing them in shul every week. And this is perhaps where Moshe realizes we're about to turn the corner, right? Maybe he's heard some of like the grumblings in the camp, and he realizes they're about to complain and they're about to sort of throw everything away that they had worked so hard for. I'm not sure. I don't want to waste everyone's time here. It loaded before, but basically what I wanted to show you with the picture of, here we go, hold on, the picture of the piece in the Torah is for anyone who lanes, there are sometimes breaks in the laning, and they have these sort of brackets that are backwards nuns. You can see them in the the pasuk or in the quote, as I put it from Sepharia, they're in Sepharia as well, but it really is so clearly its own section, which is what I was hoping to show you in the Torah. It seems like that might not, I don't know, that for whatever reason, that image is giving me trouble right now. I'm going to just go back to the source sheet, see if I can find it later. I'm going to reshare. And the words that Moshe uses are interesting, but what is more interesting is the import, I think, that the rabbis give these words. Right, so Vihi bin Soah Aaron, right? That's what we're talking about right now. The Aaron has gone out first. Vayomer Moshe Kuma Hashem v'yafuto evecha v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha. This seems to be an acknowledgement that this journey is not going to be so easy, right? Moshe would say, when that ark was set to go out, Moshe would say, "Arise, Hashem, may your enemies be scattered, and those who hate you flee before you." And when it rests, Uvnucha, Yomar, Shuvah Hashem Revivot Alfei Yisrael, which is a sort of confusing pasuk. Translated here is one of the options in Sepharia, right? Return Hashem to the myriads of thousands of Israel. Perhaps it's saying, Hashem, the myriads of thousands of Israel, please return to us. But either way, there seems to be a request for the Anan HaKavod to come back. And as we could have seen, but do not see here, this is a very discrete moment in time. And the rabbis realize that. In the Gemara in Shabbat, which also seems, I'm sorry, the formatting here is like really wonky. It did not look like this morning. Something about this image really messed up the sheet, but this is from Shabbat, page 115 to 116, and it's part of a larger discussion about when you rescue a Sefer Torah and when you don't. What about a Torah is inherently holy and what is not? So there's discussions about the types of ink that are used, the language that's used, if it's written in English or in some other language, right? Would you run to save it? And the question, of course, you would always want to save a Torah. The question is on Shabbat, when before the days of Eruv, when you did not have a dedicated team checking the Eruv each week, could you remove the Sefer Torah from the shul, which would violate Shabbat? And so you have to choose between violating Shabbat and saving the Torah. So in that case, the Torah, there has to be some sort of standard of how holy does the Torah have to be. And the discussion, or the one of the options, is about these 85 letters that comprise these two psukim up here. And somehow this section is really important. If this doesn't have this section here, right? If a Torah scroll that is worn, if there's not enough to compile from it the 85 letters as in this Torah portion, then you do not rescue it. And so it's, there are many really powerful pieces of the Torah. And of course we say every letter is meaningful in some way. So why this section? Why not the Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun that we sing on the high holidays, all the 13 attributes of God? Why not some piece of meaningful narrative about our forefathers? Why is it this section that Moshe says here? And so Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says, right here, that this portion is considered a book unto itself. Shesefer chashuvhu bifnei atzmo. So how could this be a book? Like, what does that mean for it to be a book? So the Gemara brings a pasuk, as it often does, to sort of explain where it's going. And it says from Mishlei, chatzva amudeh hashiva. I'm sort of here in this rather large chunk of Gemara, which is that she carved its 7 pillars. So what does that mean? That wisdom builds her house carved in 7 pillars. So the Rabbi Yonatan says, Elu Shiva Sifrei Torah. And the text says, well, hold on a second. What is Shiva Sifrei Torah? Right? So it's the 5 books of the Torah that we're accustomed to, and this, right? But that would be 6 books. So how do we get to 7? Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi splits Bamidbar into like what I would call Bamidbar 1 and Bamidbar 2. Maybe before the fall and after, to borrow for some other theologians out there, right? That Bamidbar 1 is when everything is going smoothly, when we're going to get to Israel in 3 days, when we feel the divine presence in our lives. Bamidbar 2, after these 2 psukim are over, is the part of Bamidbar where things are not going well. Everything is a complaint, right? The man doesn't taste good. There's not enough water. Moshe's married the wrong person, and Miriam and Aaron complain about it, right? There's not enough meat there. We wish we were in Egypt. It's sort of never ending. And that this is the middle, the bridge. And so the 7 books of the Torah are Breshit, Shmot, Vayikra, Bamidbar 1, this Vayhi being so Aaron, Bamidbar 2, and Devarim. It's kind of a wild thing. Obviously, this did not make it into sort of our canon of how we think about the Torah. But it is important enough that we anchor this opinion with a pasuk from Mishlei, but still a pasuk. And the rabbis talk about what is it separating, right? Is it separating maybe 2 sins? Is it separating the pre-sin to the post-sin? And Rav Ashi says at the end that it eventually will be put back in its proper place. It will be moved back to where we talked about the flags, which is in the very first parsha of the book of Bamidbar. And that, this atid lavo, which it's a little bit hard to know, what does that mean? This atidah, maybe the time of Mashiach, maybe when we can sort of right that wrong of steering ourselves off course, we can move this back to where it belongs, and then the story would flow more seamlessly. It's sort of an interesting idea. Like, can you really rewrite history, or is this here because we made our choices the way we made them? And so I wanted to end with a fascinating Rashi from Devarim. So skipping sort of far ahead, but talking about this very same exact thing. Moshe says to the people, because right, Devarim is a discourse from Moshe to the people. He says, look what you did, right? Re'u ma gurmatem. Right? You didn't get to take the short route. That is a journey of 11 days. You got to do it in 3 days, right? Ad shloshet yamim. That's what we saw at the beginning. That this really long trip, moderately long trip of 11 days was finished in less than half the time of 3 days. And why is that? Because Hashchina mitlabetet b'shvilechem. That God or the Shekhinah exerted itself for us, right? It's almost like you can imagine like some kid excited to go to like the zoo, right? And pulling on his parents' hands, like, hurry, hurry, come faster. And so God was so excited, right? We were in this place of expansiveness that God almost pulled us through an 11-day journey in 3 days. Or you can imagine, right? We're the kid, we're excited, and we're running behind our parent, not to keep up because we're like scared we're going to miss our train, but because we're really excited to be where we're going. And that, I wonder, I don't think this is how Rashi meant it, but almost like as though an 11-day journey felt like 3 days, right? Like time passes quickly when you're in the right mind space, in the right place, when you feel the Shekhinah upon you. And so I think, in some ways, this is kind of a boring section of this week's Parsha reading, in the sense that there's so many interesting other places to explore. But for me, I think we all make decisions in life. We all come upon these decision points many, many times throughout our lives. And it's very easy to give in to the fear of the unknown, which is, I think, what we will see tragically over the next few weeks, right? In this week's Parsha, we see the complaint about meat. Then we see the spies or the forerunners, whatever they are, making some bad choices, right? Rejecting this advice of Chovev about how important it is to go into the land, into our own land. It then is followed by Korach, a sort of leadership revolt. It's like once you pull out one piece of the Jenga blocks, it all comes crashing down. And it's easy to look back and say, oh, that was such a fond moment before we made such terrible choices. But I think that the sort of the key for how to behave, how to make better choices, how to get there in 3 days or 11 days that feels like 3 days, is to really allow God to lead you. And I think that could be meant in many, many different ways. And to allow yourself to feel God's protection, to really remember how important it is to have an eretz and a moladetech in front of you, to be able to see that, to be expanding and not leaving. And so I hope that as we as we journey with Bnei Israel, and it's easy to feel frustrated with them because they make such terrible choices, right? And it's like you're watching TV and you're like, don't run up the stairs away from the serial killer, right? Run down the stairs. Don't complain so much, Bnei Israel, right? To remember that these moments are really hard and that it's hard to feel God's presence, and that we should think about how we can get back to that place, both for us and for Bnei Israel. We'll look at over the next 3 or 4 weeks. But to remember that these decision points go better when we feel like the Aron is in front of us and the cloud of glory is above us. So I welcome thoughts, ideas, challenges, questions. Spill my coffee. I'll stop the share so we can see everyone. Oh, and I will end the recording. So goodbye to everyone on the recording.